I'm not part of this binary conception of gender of man and woman. I'm something else, baby. You wouldn't even know what kind of genders we got up in here. Hello and welcome to the Eva Bloom podcast. I'm your host, Eva Bloom, non-binary late bloomer coach and inclusive LGBTQ plus sex ed speaker. I'm so excited that you're here. When I'm not supporting late bloomers in their confidence and coming out and dating, you can find me reading a queer sci-fi or fantasy book, starting a new craft project, or playing board games with friends. Eva Bloom is a podcast all about bringing you the social psychology, tips, and tools to understand your coming out and your queerness, as well as a little bit of personal storytelling from me to help you feel a little bit less alone. If you notice that my voice sounds a little bit scratchy in this episode, it's because I'm feeling it after Pride weekend. Sometimes you're gay, and sometimes your job is to be gay, and that's how it all works out. There are new episodes of the Eva Bloom podcast out every Monday, so hit subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts to get new episodes all about second adolescence, coming out, dating, affirmations, community, all the stuff that you need to build your confidence as a newly out late bloomer queer person. If you want more support, resources, and community as a late bloomer, come on down to the Late Bloomer Support Club, a beautiful place, the virtual community where we meet every Monday, the first Monday of the month, and a theme topic to have conversations, support each other, break stuff down. We also have a beautiful Discord community open 24/7. People are sharing book racks, talking about so much dating advice, and sharing memes, all that great stuff. So hope to see you there. This episode is all about gender. I'm coming to you live as your local non-binary lesbian. I realized that I was non-binary around the same time that I came out as a lesbian in 2021. So gender has been a big part of my own personal journey of understanding my queerness and really understanding who I am and how I can move throughout the world in a way that actually feels like me. But whether you have a little funky relationship with gender, you're questioning, or you are a cis sapphic late bloomer person, thinking deeply about the expansiveness of gender and critically analyzing the things that we were taught about gender is a really good idea, whether that's just for you in your own life or if you might be dating any potential little trans and non-binary cuties out there. It's good to know what's going on for us. And also your coworkers. Being a good trans ally in the world is more important now than ever. So let's get on into it. Let's start off by breaking down some essential terms around gender so we're all on the same page. So we got gender expression, and then also how does sexual and romantic orientation play in with all of this good stuff. So gender is somebody's internal sense of womanhood, manhood, both and beyond. So it is a personal sense of this is what feels true to me, my essence internally. And then your gender expression is how you express outwardly, whether that is femininely, masculinely, a combination of both, neither, playing around. And these two different concepts, gender and gender expression, can be aligned for people. You might identify as a man and express your gender very masculinely, and they can also not be aligned. You can be a man and have a very feminine gender expression. Non-binary people look so many different ways when it comes to gender expression. Two people might have the same outward presentation, but their internal experience of gender might be very different. So it's really important to recognize that, to, of course, not be assuming people's internal sense of gender based on their external presentation, and recognizing how there can be fluidity and movement with all of these. So I'll use myself as an example. Like I said, I'm a non-binary lesbian. For me, that means that I don't have a super strong sense of gender. It's kind of floating out in the ephemera. I am a lesbian, meaning that I am into women, non-binary people, inclusive of cis and trans women, love, want to kiss. And my gender expression kind of looks different day to day. Sometimes it might be seen as more feminine. Sometimes it might be seen as less feminine. I try not to get too stressed on how other people perceive my gender expression because sometimes there's a lot of stuff that you can't control. We'll get to me and my own personal experience of gender later on in the episode. But yeah, just reminding that gender is an extremely personal experience. Two non-binary people likely don't have the exact same experience in their gender, just the way that two women might not have the exact same experience in their gender. Beyond like whether you're comparing a cis woman or a trans woman, two trans women probably have different experiences of their gender. Two cis women have different experiences of their gender. And I think there can be this idea of even within like a binary model, it doesn't help cis people or people who have binary senses of gender either. Like there is more complexity and nuance and expansiveness within, even if we were talking about binary categories as well. So I think it can be helpful for everybody, even if you identify as cis, to think about what does your gender mean to you? Like what does it mean for you to be a woman? What does it mean for you to be a man? And learning more about yourself can help you not only be a better trans, non-binary ally, but I think it can also help you like think about what are the different expectations of my gender that maybe have been taught to me that I don't want to carry anymore. Or what are the ideas of gender that do make sense for me and that I am intentionally wanting to embody in my life and in the world. Moving from here, I want to talk a little bit about the non-binary umbrella. This podcast episode about gender, like with every episode of Out in Bloom, is a combination of my background in social psychology and my training and my own lived experience as a non-binary person. So as we talk about gender, there's going to be a bit of a focus on the non-binary experience. So starting off with, what does non-binary mean? Non-binary basically means that your gender doesn't fit into these two categories that are prescriptive of gender in the modern Western era right now. The modern Western world, there have been lots of different conceptions and categorizations and language to describe gender across time and space, across cultures. Like even if you look at many different specific indigenous tribes or indigenous communities within so-called North America, Turtle Island, there are like dozens of different words to describe different experiences of gender. If you go to the history of India and India's ideas about gender, gender is not just a static biological truth, we know that, but it's also not like when we talk about not just our body, but we talk about our mind and our soul. These categories are also socially constructed. So the gender binary, I'm talking about that in terms of North America in the 21st century. But that's not the only way that we've ever categorized gender. Tangent aside about the history in the larger context of gender, I want to talk a little bit about the non-binary umbrella and what it means to be non-binary. So non-binary is kind of a term to describe an experience of gender by describing what it's not, which is kind of funny. It's saying I'm not part of this binary conception of gender of man and woman. I'm something else, baby. You wouldn't even know what kind of genders we got up in here. So it really can encapsulate a plethora of things. Like queer, like sapphic, non-binary is an umbrella term to describe a plethora of different experiences of gender that are more specific and varied. So I'm going to talk about a couple of them. Maybe you might resonate with some of these. Literally, when I was teaching my latest round of Queer Enough, which is the 8-week program that I run for self-growth and confidence for late bloomers, I was doing an exercise looking at different gender spectrums, and I learned something about myself. So maybe you'll learn something about yourself and be like, oh my gosh, there's language to describe my relationship with gender, which I think is pretty cool. But starting with agender, which is a lack of gender. If you're on the internet and you get a little error message, a 404, your website has not been found, or like NA, not applicable, as opposed to a 0, which is still something, you're like, nope, there's not even a value here. Yeah, that's agender, which is different than gender queer, where you're like, ooh, I'm queering ideas of gender. I'm gender full. Like, I'm non-binary in the way, and there's like lots of stuff going on. You're like, this is an abundance of gender in so many different directions. Versus agender is like, there's not so much here. Which for me, when I was doing this exercise, like I said, Queer Enough, of walking through different forms of spectrums of gender, not only just like a line of man, woman, and then non-binary in the middle, I was looking at a 2-dimensional spectrum of gender, which included like gender strength or intensity of gender, man, woman, and then agender, and then gender full. And plotting it out like that, if you're on YouTube, you'll see. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we're in it. We're visualizing together. That really brought a light bulb to me to be like, oh my gosh, like I haven't really thought about gender like intensity before. Or if you're looking at like a transparency bar of an image, if you're like, is this really like full pigment or is it kind of like faded? And I was like, oh my gosh, I think I resonate with being agender in some ways, which I think in part was really confusing for me because based on my body and we got this this certain type of chest going on. Throughout my life, I've been gendered by other people and by society in a very strong way. People are like, oh, that is a very quote unquote womanly form. And so the idea that I don't always feel a very strong sense of gender felt contradictory and difficult for me to place. But yeah, doing that exercise of like, okay, not just like where do I feel in terms of like womanhood or manhood in terms of my gender, but how actually like intense is that internal sense? Because yeah, I don't really feel gender super strongly. But yeah, so that's agender, and then gender full. Gender queer means that you are queering ideas of gender, playing around with femininity, masculinity in a way that is a fuck you to cis hetero norms and ideas about gender, which sometimes resonates with me. We also have gender fluid to describe an experience of gender that changes over time. And there's lots of different ways that might look. Gender fey is a label to describe individuals who kind of experience fluidity within the feminine area of gender. That kind of place, which also I'm like, interesting. SEU. There is a really awesome influencer, Megan. I can't pronounce his last name because Dutch, but I'll put it in the show notes and also here. And she talks about her gender fluidity and like they do a bunch of get ready with me's where every day they like can feel different in their gender. And I think that's a really cool way for him to like showcase what gender fluidity looks like on a day-to-day basis. Another gender fluid person, Erica Ishii. But for all my TTRPG D&D heads out here, somebody who is non-binary and like a performer. So some really cool non-binary representation there too. We also have other labels within non-binary, transmasc and transfemme, which you might have seen being thrown around on the internet. Basically, that describes people of a trans experience. So you're assigned one gender at birth, and you maybe are partaking in different gender-affirming care options. Maybe you're on hormones, and that moves you to another side of the gender spectrum, but you don't necessarily identify completely with the like opposite quote unquote binary gender. So for example, Dylan Mulvaney uses she and they pronouns. So they might use the term transfemme. maybe as well as the term trans woman, but that, describes a non-binary trans femme experience, potentially. And then trans masc in the other direction. We also have demi-girl and demi-boy, which are labels within the non-binary umbrella to describe individuals who relate to or identify in some way with womanhood or manhood, boyhood, girlhood, but not completely also feel other different expansive ways about gender. So I hope that really blew your mind about all the different ways that people can experience gender. And, people can also use multiple of these labels, just like with sexual orientation. Like somebody might use sapphic, bi, and pan, or queer, all together to describe how they experience gender. And somebody might use a bunch of labels to describe how their gender works. Like for me, I might use agender to say I don't feel super strong strength of gender, gender queer to say I like fucking with ideas of cis hetero ideas of how we should experience gender. I might use gender fluid to say that some days I feel more genderful, or my gender feels a particular flavor or essence or energy, and some days it feels different. So yeah, that's what agender, genderqueer, and gender fluid might mean together. Wow, isn't language so cool? Isn't the human experience so cool and expansive? I think so. I've also spoken a lot about this and have kind of alluded to it at the beginning of this podcast, but there's no one way to look non-binary. There's no one way to look trans. Again, gender is an internal experience, and there are lots of just human beings are diverse in the way that we look in the world. So are trans people. And there are also a lot of different factors that go into how you can pursue gender affirming care as a trans person, the different types of gender affirming care that you may or may not even want. Some people live in countries or places where it's really hard to access hormones. So that doesn't make somebody more or less trans than somebody else. And also everybody on hormones is going to have the hormones impact their body differently. So you might have more or less facial hair, or you might get weight distribution in a different way based on your genetics. Trans and non-binary people are super diverse. It's also worth thinking about how gender not only is socially constructed across time and across region, but also in terms of our modern ideas of gender, they are incredibly informed by our social context. Different ideas of gender are different in different communities, just like the different gender roles. Gender is also a racial social construct. So it's important for us to unpack these ideas about what we think androgyny or femininity or masculinity can look like. When you think of femininity, are you thinking of white femininity? For example, brown women, Indian women, black women can have hair over their body that is darker and more visible, or have more hair. And who's to say that that isn't feminine? This expectation to be hairless or for our hair to look fine and not be visible is an idea around white supremacy and upholding white femininity. Even things about the way we wear our hair, the idea that wavy hair or straight hair or smooth hair is more feminine, is rooted in racism. So if you see a trans person, a queer person with locks, with braids, that is not less feminine. Also, ideas about bodies and curves. Speaking from myself as a fat white person with a big old chest, people are always going to perceive that in a specific way and gender that in a specific way. And I think we really need to expand our ideas about what androgyny looks like. Androgyny is not just a flat chest and a thin person. Androgyny is not just masculine light. And masculine light doesn't just mean no curves. And of course, we have been fed this very narrow representation of what non-binary can be, because there is still even so few representation of non-binary and trans people in the media, that what we do get is thin white people. So it's important for us to be why is that the only representation of non-binary people? Why is that the most palatable representation of non-binary people that was being pushed on us by the media? And also, can we interrogate interrogate that and expand the ways that we think about gender and see gender through this, that gender exists in this cultural, expansive way. What if we did that? I also want to, content warning for eating disorders, but the rates of eating disorders among trans people are really high, and that shit isn't unrelated. This idea that we need to perform femininity or masculinity in a thin way for it to be considered more valid is fucked up and literally hurting trans people. Just some things to think about. And like I said, non-binary is not just masculine light. Non-binary doesn't mean that like you're only non-binary enough if you don't wear any color in your clothing, or like you never wear skirts and you can only do that if you're like thin. It's silly. It's so silly. When I like was coming out as non-binary, I think there was a part of me that really wanted people to believe me. And partially, like, I did really like dressing masculinely. I felt really good. And also, I think there was a part of me that's like, I need to dress more mask, otherwise people won't believe that I'm non-binary, which is messed up. Discovering these like so wild like gender expression boxes that we put on each other of like men, masculine people like very rarely wear color or only wear certain colors. And that I was going to be read as more feminine if I wore specific colors or if I wore specific silhouettes, if my shirt was cut a certain way, which if you are on a queer journey where you're learning to dress mask, you are also maybe discovering this, and it's probably really exciting and feels affirming for you. For me, I felt I was losing my mind. I was like, what do you... The prison of masculinity, you don't get to wear color. I want people to read me as in the middle, playing around with different gender, but based on different stuff. For people to read me anywhere in the middle, I would need to dress like way more masculine. Then actually it feels fun for me. So I don't know what the point of that story was, other than to release yourself of chains. The point of the story for me in my life was to release myself of chains and to stop catering my expression of my gender for how mostly cis straight people would see me. I was like, well, why am I doing that? I don't give a fuck about cis straight people and what they think about my life. Why am I dressing in this way to make them believe that I'm non-binary or to read me as something other than a cis woman? Which, of course, navigating dysphoria and how you're seen in the world is so real, and I don't want to negate that for people. And for me and like where I'm at with my dysphoria, I'm very grateful that I don't have to go into an office where I'm being perceived by cis het people all the time. But yeah, for me, that has meant just you can't control how other people are going to perceive you. And I'm going to wear what feels nice and cool to me. And my friends and my partner and my roommates know that I'm not binary and see me, and I don't need to perform any kind of bullshit for other people. I do also want to talk about what it means for me to be a non-binary lesbian. I also talk about it in the podcast about labels. I'll put a little card here. So if you want to go listen to that podcast, you absolutely can. But basically for me, as I was coming out and realizing like, oh, I've just like assumed that I'm into men. I don't know if that assumption is actually true about me. I think that was just like every piece of media and every framework that I was told me that that must be true. And I liked to flirt and liked to feel closeness. And now that I'm really experiencing sexual and romantic attraction, I really get it, what it is. Once I kind of released myself from the expectations of performing heterosexuality or being attracted to men, I was like, how much was I also performing womanhood or thinking that I was a woman because that's what everybody told me that I should be, when it never really felt totally right. And I feel like I felt such a sense of spaciousness within the lesbian identity, of this identity is not about cishet people at all. We don't give a fuck about what they think. Like, it's just about you and being you, that I was able to be like, I think I'm non-binary. Like, I don't think that I'm a woman. And yeah, there has been like a long history of lesbians who have funky little genders, who are trans. I would highly recommend checking out Leslie Feinberg or Kate Bornstein and their really amazing works. They're two trans lesbians Literally, one of the stripes on the lesbian flag is about unique relationships to womanhood. When in our culture, we tie so much this idea of being a good woman to performing heterosexuality. When you step away from heterosexuality, your sense of womanhood can sometimes feel a little bit weird. But yeah, for me, being a lesbian feels like such a big part of my gender identity too. I don't really feel a strong gender identity, but I do know that my gender is dyke. So that's what I know about that. Moving on, we can't have a gender episode without talking about pronouns. Do a little elementary language lesson for us today. A pronoun is a word that replaces a proper noun. So instead of saying Eva, my name, you would say they. You just replace somebody's name with some other words to refer them to. So you're not just using their name all the time. So everybody's got pronouns. Everybody's using pronouns. Pronouns don't just mean they, them. I think the most common non-binary pronouns are they, them. But pronouns can be more than that. A lot of non-binary people and, cis people use multiple pronouns. You can use both she and they or he and they. You can use all of them. You're like, give me he, she, they. Mix them all, give them to me. And that can mean maybe you experience a fluidity in your gender, so you want to use different pronouns depending on how you're feeling. That might mean you feel expansiveness in your gender. You're like, I feel like a woman plus. Plus a little something. A little something's happening here. So you want to use she and they. You mix them up, use them in different parts of the sentences, kind of interweave them together. For some people, the pronoun that they put first means the pronoun that they want you to use more. So they use he, they. Maybe you want to use he a little bit more. And then sometimes they want you to use them equally. Or they're saying he, they, which means, God, I don't think that cishet people are going to use they, them for me. So he is fine, but they's nice. So I would talk to the people in your life and ask them how they want you to use their pronouns. I actually didn't come out publicly on the internet in my career as using exclusively they, them pronouns for about 3 years after I came out as non-binary, which is kind of wild, even though I was using them exclusively with friends and close people towards me, because I had the idea that, people are going to see me as non-binary. But I actually had my roommate who I hadn't been living with for very long, was like, hey, if you just like people to use they, them pronouns for you, you could just ask them to do that. And I did, and it was really nice. Even as a professional gay and non-binary person, there are still close people in my life who struggle to use the pronouns, even if it's been almost 4 years. So, we're all on our journeys, and sometimes you have to affirm yourself when other people are not affirming you. Sometimes you gotta set boundaries with people that are not using your pronouns. There's also neo-pronouns like ze, their, fey, fair, I believe. You gotta learn how to use them. And as you're learning how to use pronouns, if you make a mistake, it's always best to apologize and move on swiftly. It is not cool or fun to expect the person that you've misgendered to forgive you if you're overly profusely apologizing. That doesn't feel nice. So correct yourself and keep it pushing and practice. Using somebody's correct pronouns is like using somebody's correct name. It's a big form of respect. It's a basic form of respect for somebody. So especially if they're a close person in your life, it doesn't take that much time to practice. Writing down some sentences using their pronouns. Practicing with your partner. Be like, let's practice using Eva's new pronouns so that you get quick at them. You get better at them the more you use them. So that is what I would recommend. Lastly, I want to talk about ways to affirm your gender. Gender can be affirmed and expressed in a lot of different ways, whether you're cis or trans. In small ways, big ways, you can kind of explore and tap into that. Gender euphoria, which is positive, tingly, happy, affirming aligned feelings of gender, and mitigate gender dysphoria, which is pain or discomfort, misalignment around your gender. So that can be something like hair, if you cut your hair short, or if you get extensions, or wear wigs, or cut your hair into a mullet. Whenever I put my hair half up, half down, my girlfriend, because she's the sweetest in the whole world, she says that I look like a knight, and that is very gender affirming. It's so sweet. I want to cry. Sometimes your gender is knight, and that's the way it is. Even things like accessories, playing around with nail polish in different colors, or with makeup or with different silhouettes of clothes can feel very gender affirming. Music can also be a huge form of gender affirmation, whether that's listening to music that feels very connected to your gender, performing music, whether that's at home, or I love to dance, and dancing in different styles can feel very gender affirming for me. I had a Zumba instructor who I worked with for a couple years who, if you don't know, Zumba is very like Latin dance inspired, and they would do the like masculine Latin dance inspired moves where it can often be very feminine. And that felt so gender euphoric and great. I loved it. I was so happy. Language can be absolutely a huge one in terms of gender affirmation, whether that's exploring with pronouns, even like labels. I've had several conversations with my girlfriend, which have been nerve-wracking, but very helpful to be like, yeah, I want to be called your girlfriend and your partner. Can you kind of mix both of them up and use them together? Also, descriptive language. Do you like feminine compliments? Do you like masculine compliments? Do you like ones that are kind of seen as neutral, like hot or attractive? Do you want a little mix? And I was like, I really appreciate when you call me gorgeous all the time, but I also want to be called handsome. And then she did it, and it was really nice. And I was like, I love it. We love to see it. So yeah, a bunch of different ways to affirm your gender. I want to talk more about gender in future episodes, including different ways that you can affirm your partner's gender. I'm going to link a post, I believe, that I have about this in the description. If not, at the very least, I have a old Patreon newsletter that broke down an academic study where they talk to partners and trans people and be like, how do you affirm your partner? And it's really cool and helpful. So that rocks. If you are exploring your gender or want support developing confidence, stepping into yourself as a queer person, I do one-on-one coaching about gender. So if you're also a funky little non-binary person or you want to talk about your gender and how that is connecting to the way you experience pleasure or in the bedroom, come on down and we can chat about it. We also talk about this in Queer Enough, my 8-week-long program for supporting late bloomers in confidence and self-growth, and I'm running it again in the fall in October, November, so you can jump in on the wait list so that you'll be the first to get access to it. It's a small community, so hop in my spots, plus access to the early bird discount, so that'll be very exciting. Moving on to the last segment of the podcast, which is what I'm loving right now, which I always prepare in advance and never just think up on the spot. Talking about the books that I'm reading, what I am listening to, what I'm cooking, and creators that I'm loving. So in terms of what I'm reading, I'm rereading Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe, which is so good. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I'm reading it and I'm like, this hits. I wished I don't I'm a third of the way through it. I'm like, I don't want it to be over. It's so good. It's just so beautifully written. And it's about this lesbian in the 1950s. She's in high school. She's in Chinatown. And she's realizing she's a lesbian. And she's a little crush. And navigating the political climate and the intersections of what it means to be Chinese American in the time of the Red Scare, going to lesbian bars. It just rocks so much. What I'm listening to, this is not music, but I don't care. I've been listening to the final episodes of the first book of Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One from Worlds Beyond Number, which is a fiction podcast that is a fantasy, witches, wizards, obviously wild ones, also talking about war and genocide and power. Oh, it's so good. It's so incredibly excellent. I can't believe that they're going to be wrapping it up at the end of the summer. But then Miss Abria Iyengar, who's a part of the World's Band Number cast, is going to be doing a space show. So I feel devastation, and there is almost nothing that would make me happier than a Bria Igar doing a fictional TTRPG series in space. So big highs, big lows. In terms of what I am cooking recently, I made some food for my girlfriend. This continues the What is Eva cooking for their girlfriend segment of the show. When my girlfriend and I were heading back from the Dyke March, so tired, simply so deliriously tired, I said, I don't want to cook anything. I want to do cold tofu. I want to do like soft tofu, and then you get a little sauce. You do spring onions. You do a little sesame seeds. You just scoop it, get some rice. We do a little spicy cucumber salad. It was so good. And my girlfriend is the best person in the world. I love them because I said deliriously on this up, I'm like, I have a vision. This is what I need. And they said, okay, I see the vision. I trust you. Full trust. We're going to go stop at a different stop. We're going to pick stuff up and then we're going to make dinner. And it was great. And for that, I am grateful. And then creators that I am obsessed with. The people that I was just looking at before I recorded the podcast is Elle Duran and Ezra Michael, I think. They're a T for T couple and they're so cute. Elle does a lot of like trans educational content, and Ezra makes music in a band called Pussy Boys and releases so much great merch about being a pussy boy. Oh, it's so good. I'm like, do I need it? Maybe. They're just like so cute. And to see T for T love is so special and affirming, and I love it so much. And it feels appropriate for the gender episode. So I knew what I planned it all along. It was the big game. Well, that brings us to this episode all about gender. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe on YouTube if you aren't already, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Give it a little 5-star rating. It helps more late bloomers, sapphic and queer people find the podcast. Like I said, if you want more community, come on down to Late Bloomer Support Club, monthly meetings, Discord. Super cute time. If you want to get one-on-one support from me, you can check out my one-on-one coaching, not just about gender, also about dating, about intimacy, about coming out and late bloomer journey. Would love to support you. If you would like to bring me to your college or university for 2025-2026 to talk about queer and trans relationships, consent, dating, all of that good stuff, I would love to come on by. All the information is in the show notes, but that's all for me. Stay curious, keep blooming, and I will see you in the next episode.